Meanwhile, Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara is questioning the actions of the ICE agent who shot and killed Renee Good earlier this month. In an interview with 60 Minutes, O'Hara said the agent appeared to violate basic officer safety principles when approaching Good's SUV, repeatedly placing himself in the vehicle's path just before the shooting.
I've seen the videos, and it's not clear to me why he appears to be in the path of the vehicle more than once. When you approach someone in a vehicle in a law enforcement encounter, there's very basic steps you take to ensure the officer's safety and to de-escalate the situation.
Echoing what we've heard from so many active and former law enforcement personnel since the shooting. Joining us now live from Minneapolis, MS Now reporter Nnamdi Ighanwu. Nnamdi, great to see you again. It is obviously tensions high there in Minnesota in the wake of the DOJ's word that these investigations may come. Give us the scene there. What is it like for the people coming out of the weekend, on this holiday morning?
Well, Jonathan, as we've talked about, there have been a lot of protests as people here are frustrated by what they view as a lack of accountability or a lack of, into a lack of proper investigation into the death of Renee Good. There have been calls here since the day of that shooting from state leaders and protesters alike that the officer involved here at least is subject to an in-depth investigation into his actions. And the more the federal government indicates that will not take place, the more frustration builds here among the people I speak to. We saw a variety of protests over the weekend as tensions remain high, like you point out. On Saturday, for instance, there was a right-wing influencer who is self-described as an Islamophobe that held a protest that intended to march through an area in the city called Little Somalia. What ended up happening there is only about roughly a dozen people came to support him. But against the advice of several state leaders, hundreds of counter-protesters came and met him, and that resulted in quite volatile scenes on Saturday and some concerns that there could be perhaps escalation or violence that could result in an additional surge of federal resources. That at least now has not happened. But later that night at the Whipple Federal Building where I am, which of course serves as the de facto headquarters for ICE, there was even more protest. There was more of those tense scenes you've seen between law enforcement and protesters upset at the presence of the thousands of ICE agents that have descended in the city. I want to show you some of the reinforcement that have now been added in the face of some of those tense clashes here at this building. If you see all of this new fencing right here, that's just come up in the last 24 hours as the Hennepin County Sheriff has started playing more of an active role in ensuring that at the very least they're doing what they can to limit the interactions between protesters, often who are very upset, and agents that are often tasked with guarding this building. So we actually saw a pretty astounding scene yesterday where there was a row of sheriff vehicles all across this road, creating a physical barrier that's now been replaced with this new fencing that at least is supposed to serve as as helping create a designated area for protesters. That also comes roughly a day later on Sunday. We saw additional protests despite the very, very cold weather we're currently experiencing. There was a postal worker protest, which was notable, of course, because postal workers are federal employees, but they have been among the loudest voices against the surge of federal personnel we've seen here. There was also a protest at a church in St. Paul after protesters say they identified a pastor who also works as an ICE agent and held a demonstration in his church. We know that of all the protests that took place this weekend, that's the one that the Justice Department has paid attention to. They have indicated that they at least plan on investigating some of the, quote, agitators that interrupted the church proceeding there. So despite the cold weather, people still making their voices heard and protests still very much so continuing.
MS Now reporter Nnamdi Ighanwu continuing to do great reporting for us live from Minneapolis. Nnamdi, thank you again. So.